Hi, and welcome back to the Commuters podcast. Today we're going to be talking about Hot Rod. Hot Rod is a comedy from 2007 starring Andy Samberg. The synopsis reads: A self proclaimed stuntman, Rod Kimball, is preparing for the jump of his life to clear 15 buses to raise money for his abusive stepfather, Frank's life saving heart operation. The movie was directed by Akiva Schaffer and written by Pam Brady. Kiva Schaffer he's known for working with Andy Samberg a lot. He was a writer for that pop star movie. He was a writer on Saturday Night Live. He helped with the Lego movie.
Hmm.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He guest starred in, like, he worked with Andy Samberg a lot. He has since then and before then. And I think that kind of shows because I think one of the strengths, and we'll get into, of this movie is Andy Samberg's performance. And a big thing with comedies is a lot of the time it's either going to work for you or it's not going to work for you. If the humor doesn't connect with you, if you're somebody who doesn't really like Andy Samberg, I think a movie like this sometimes doesn't really, maybe won't connect with you. For me personally, I'm going to admit right now, I'm a little biased. I've pretty much grown up to an extent with this movie, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I Watching it with a more critical eye, though, I have noticed, some of its faults and some of the parts where it falls short, and we'll definitely get into all of that. So straight off the bat, though, I want to, say that I'm very interested to see what you guys thought, considering I recommended this one, and I wanted to take us into a more light direction with a film that was more positive and more just kind of fun. And everything's kind of dark and dreary in the world right now, so you know what, I wanted to lighten the mood. So what do you guys think overall?
Man, I hate movies, and let me say, this movie was really bad. I'm just kidding. I liked it. I had a good time. I think we've definitely we've covered a lot of we've been pretty serious for the most part with a lot of our movies as of late, or at least if you get what I mean by nothing that's been an explicit comedy. In fact, I think this is the first real comedy we've covered.
Yeah, I believe so. That was actually one of the reasons why I recommended it as well, because I don't think we've done an actual comedy. I mean, we've definitely done movies that
What do
have
you mean, guys?
comedic
We
elements.
reviewed Joker like not too long ago.
Well, I guess you're
Oh,
right. That movie wasn't a tragedy; it was a comedy. I guess we did, like, to an extent, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, sort of a comedy, and to an extent, like, even the Marvel movies that we've done, you could kind of call comedies. But this is the
Yeah,
first,
but
like,
nothing like true blue comedy.
yeah. So that was one of the other reasons too. I was excited to kind of try something different, take us in new and unexpected directions. So Spencer, what'd you kind of think? General thoughts.
Given that I didn't see this movie up until, it was recommended for me to watch by you, it was interesting because I've known just roughly about Andy Samberg for forever. I mean, I grew up on all the Lonely Island skits on YouTube, watching all of their stuff. And Andy Samberg, I mean, as far as I've watched him, he's still kind of hit or miss for me with his comedy. I definitely agree, though, that this movie is totally Andy in that it's super lighthearted. It plays on established tropes and kind of pokes fun at it, but it still holds itself up in what those tropes represent, which I can definitely see in like characters or pieces of writing that he's involved in, where he doesn't like to just do the opposite of something for the sarcasm of it and the, haha, I understand this, I'm going to poke fun at it, look how lame it is, you know? He's able
Yeah.
to look at something that can still be tropey and pull it off just from kind of a self-aware standpoint. And I think I definitely got that from this movie.
Yeah, that's something that I think overall with the film itself, like, a lot of the plot points are very maybe hallmarky or very, like, over dramatic, and they do make a point to kind of like poke fun at those types of movies, because, like, if you take away the comedy aspect of this film, it's a story about somebody, who's going to do a big thing to raise money to help save his father. And, like, so it's like got this very noble premise of, like, oh yeah, this is those inspirational movies that people make. But then,
Right.
once you get into the nitty gritty of it, you're like, oh, okay, so he's actually saving his father just so he can beat his ass. Like,
Right.
all of these elements have, like, kind of a twist to them of, like, okay, so he's raising money by doing stunts because he thought his dad was a stuntman, his real dad, but he actually wasn't. He was just a dude who died choking on some pie. And like it gets into a lot of these aspects where from broad strokes you're like, oh, it's just a cliche inspirational Hallmark movie, but really every kind of like Hallmark twist is it, or a Hallmark moment is twisted to be like, okay, actually this stuff can be kind of dumb in those movies, and we want to make it more entertaining, and but still using these plot points to kind of drive the story forward. And I do think that mileage may vary with these plot points. For me, for the most part, it works just because of how ridiculous. Like, and I think it comes between the relationship between Ian McShane's character Frank and Andy Samberg's character Rod, and how
Hmm.
just like they'll have like these tender moments, and then they'll be followed up by like always reminding you that he just wants to beat him up because he wants to
Right.
earn his respect. I really enjoy that aspect of the film, and I think it's one of the stronger parts of it is their dynamic.
Yeah, because they managed to make it tender while also satirizing that hyper masculine, father son relationship of, oh, I gotta beat my dad so that he respects me. I was
So
also really, just as a side note, really, really taken aback at the quality of the casting in this movie. I mean, for a movie that Andy Samberg literally said himself that he wasn't expecting to get reviewed well and wasn't expecting to do well, they had an awesome cast. I
yeah,
mean,
for
when
sure.
Bill Hader came out as his friend Dave, I mean, I was not expecting Bill Hader, much less like Danny McBride and Ian McShane.
Yeah, they got a pretty good cast all around. You had Ilsa Fisher, or Isla Fisher. I have no idea how it's pronounced.
I think I always said Isla.
You had one of the other Lonely Island. I can't remember his name, but he's the shorter. He plays as Kevin in the movie. Well, actually,
Uh, Jorma.
yeah, all three of the Lonely Island showed up in the movie though, because there was the part where Dave like did acid, and the person who gives him the acid is the other Lonely Island band member, Chris Parnell, or not Chris Parnell, but whatever the guy's name is. But overall, I thought the cast definitely was really strong. I liked how Danny McBride, Bill Hader, and Andy Samberg played off of each other. I think Danny McBride, he has some of the funnier jokes in the movie, and playing that kind of like over the top redneck. I
Yeah.
enjoyed some of his humor, and because like I kind of know people like that in real life. Like there's a point where it's like, oh, this is satire, but also this is kind of reflecting what some people in these small towns and stuff are like, which I find kind of funny. Something I did appreciate from this movie, I mean, it does have a kind of very indie feel to it in the way it's shot, and I kind of appreciate that. Like it's shot very very cleanly. It has very nice warm colors, and I didn't find it to be boring in the way that it was shot. I like the way a lot of the stuff is composed. There's a few parts where I was like I could have used a little bit more out of it, but I definitely wasn't like completely let down in the terms of how it's shot. Looking at it from that angle, one thing I do appreciate from this film is it's a stunt film, and there is
Hmm.
a all of these stunts in this movie are pretty much all done in person or by real people. One specific stunt I want to point out is at the very beginning. He goes off this ramp and then flies off his moped and hits his back on the other ramp, and it looks like a dummy because of like how he flops onto the ground. That was an actual stuntman who actually broke his back doing that stunt. That dude was in the hospital or something for like 8 months, and they actually used the take because apparently, like when a stuntman does a stunt, you don't want to, and they hurt themselves. You want it to be worth it. But I found that very interesting. The stunt in the very beginning, when you watch it, like I thought it was a dummy. I was like, "There's no way somebody's body does that." When it flops on, and his legs are like halfway across, like of his. It's really unsettling once you know that it's a real person. But I did appreciate that with most of the stunts. They're just, even though like some of them are like, they're low stakes, like the one where he goes into the pool, you're not going to get hurt doing that. But I appreciated that from the film.
I mean, yeah, the fact that the stuntman actually broke his back in the process of actually doing that, I'm really glad that they put it in because it's like a very interesting, visceral start to the movie. You're like,
Hmm.
ow, ooh, ooh, ow. And it gives you an idea, like, it immediately sets you up for, like, oh boy, this is going to be one of those movies
Yeah.
where he's not a good stuntman. And
Looks like
that's,
this movie's gonna crash and burn. Uh-huh.
Oh, Spencer's he's on fire today, much like Rod was at that one part in the movie.
I think,
He was a hot rod.
oh boy,
Uh,
oh boy. I think one of the main things that like kept me pretty attached to the humor's a really subjective thing for some people, and this movie is one of those ones where like it kind of represents that like stupid humor stylized movie where it's like you have any opportunity where the movie could go too far and it could
Yeah,
start becoming like a disaster movie, or it could become like one of those movies that you get like that like super like ooh cringe, this is not funny, it's just trying too hard, it's reference humor out the butt, and you hate it. This movie does a good job from it kept itself from getting there, except for like there's like one or two moments that I was like, hey,
Yeah.
you're almost there, movie. You better watch it. But for the most part, I was like genuinely laughing because a lot of it came from funny dialogue choices, and also because like the characters themselves are written and created in such a way that you really do feel like they're just like a bunch of like idiots living in a town who are doing stupid things.
Yeah, there's also a nice attention to detail that I appreciate. Like, there's a part where so Rod has the big like dramatic moment where he learns that his dad wasn't a stuntman and stuff, so he's gonna become a normal guy, you know. So he goes shopping,
yeah,
and there's a few like little things, and it's like they don't overtly say anything about any of this stuff. But one, I appreciate how he's dressed with like the sweater and the tie, but two, he has a cart full of alcohol. And he's like, there's nobody mentions any of this stuff. It's just he has a cart full of alcohol. He's like, I'm an adult, I'm shopping, and nobody like says anything about it, which I appreciate because they're not trying to hit you over the nose. But then later to that day, when like he gets the call from Dave to come pick him up, he's still wearing that sweater and the tie in his bed, and I'm like, it's just little things like that. It's like this dude's dumb. And when he tries to be like an adult or whatever, it just shows how dumb he is. But I appreciate it in like a funny way. But there's something
right.
else about some of the jokes because you mentioned there is a little bit of reference humor. Luckily, it doesn't go too far, and that's one thing I appreciate about some comedies from around the mid 2000s that I appreciate is like reference humor wasn't as big then as it is now, and reference humor can be very annoying in my opinion. Like there's a scene where Rod he gallops off to a wooded glen to punch dance out his rage, as he words it. And
Hmm.
it's a reference to Footloose. Like it has that song, and it's like it's got the lighting, and he's dancing in that way. And I like that scene a lot because it drives the story forward. Like it's showing the character of Rod, but and it's kind of funny because it's a reference to Footloose, but it's not overt in the sense that you can still enjoy that scene even if you haven't seen Footloose. And I can attest to
Right.
that because I enjoyed that scene even though I didn't know it was from Footloose at first till I learned that later.
Hmm.
And then like he has that super long fall, which is like it does toe the line between okay, how long is this fall gonna be? Because like yeah, it was funny. Maybe it's not as funny afterwards. I do think that can kind of toe the line. There's a couple bits that go on a little too long. That one, the one with Will, another big actor that's in this, Will Arnett. Later in the film, the girl breaks up with him, and he's like, he says "babe" for like 10 minutes. And it's like I think they could have cut that a little bit earlier. There's a couple jokes like that where you're like, you're towing the line of timing. But I think for the most part, the jokes kind of land, at least for me. And I know obviously I'm a little biased here, but curious what you guys think about the jokes overall.
Normally I'm not really in the market of I wouldn't call this absurdist comedy, but it kind of toes that line between, just that style of humor that's become really, really popular in the last 10 to 15 years, where they drive points home that are meant to really just specifically be uncomfortable. And people like that uncomfortable humor because I don't know. I think psychologically it just kind of takes people out of their own head of being awkward and unrelatable, and they get to see that in another character. I don't, yeah, that kind of humor never really clicks with me, and I think Hot Rod toes the line on that, but it doesn't dip over too far into that side because I think that's what made it watchable for me and enjoyable, frankly, was that it still took itself seriously. Even when it was making jokes, it still kept itself firmly grounded in a no, we are making, granted, kind of a spoof, but still a generally serious Hallmark movie, like you said earlier.
Yeah, there's still an emotional core to the movie, which I think still kind of holds throughout the thing, even though, like, it's hard to kind of hit those emotional beats in a comedy like this, but I do think they kind of hold up for the most part, like specifically with Frank and him, because even though like the whole joke of him wanting to beat him up, there's still like you can tell that Frank does like he loves his son and like he doesn't want to actually die, but he has to put up that front.
Of
But
course, because it's the only thing that Rod really is capable of feeling for his stepdad.
yeah,
Is rage.
there's also like
Rage.
Rage Against the Dying of the Light. That would be a reference to a poem that's in Interstellar. I like the joke. Like, there's a couple of lol random jokes, and once again, this is like, it's they're not used way too much, and I think that's something that I appreciate because nowadays lol random jokes can carry an entire movie. People just be like, every joke is oh, it's random, so it's funny. But like, there's the part where they're like singing, and then like they're in the crowd is marching, and then it devolves into this riot afterwards. They're like, ah, man, that got really bad, and it's like Danny McBride's character is like holding a TV, and he's like, yeah, man, it's crazy that somebody would take advantage of a situation like that, and it's like the whole time he's holding a TV, and
Ooh,
like nobody
topical.
says anything about. I know, topical, right? Nobody says anything about it though, but it was one of those moments that I thought like. There's a lot of interplay between Danny McBride's character, Bill Hader's character, and Andy Samberg's character that I enjoy. Like, there's a part in the beginning where he goes to the pool and he's like, "Hey, where's Kevin?" And he's like, he's not here. He's like, yeah. He's like, why? He's like, it's weird, right? And it's like he's not really answering his question. There's these certain like cognitive dissonance, kind of reminded me of Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where it's like sometimes
Yeah.
like you're on completely two different wavelengths. I should say the characters are, and that's sometimes hard to pull off in a way that's entertaining. And I appreciated it in this for between Danny McBride's character because he's kind of like, I mean, he's like kind of the idiot redneck.
Yeah, I think like lol random humor is definitely like one of those things that like hits in the modern day is like terrible. But I also think that the reason why it works and doesn't work in certain places is because you got to set the viewer up for how lol random you go. And the thing is some of the lol random moments in this are like, I don't know, they're like, I don't want to say plausible, but they're like, they don't carry that unbelievability that a lot of other movies do. Like, it's not like, oh, here comes blank person and they're doing blank thing. Wow.
Yeah.
Instead, it's more like, ha, funny dialogue. What?
Yeah, I think there's
And
only one example of the little random humor in this that I thought doesn't work at all, like in a big way, and I think that's the part with Ebenezer Scrooge at the end, where it's like
yeah,
it doesn't really add anything, and you're like, oh, okay, that's just for random humor, and it's like, it didn't really land. Whereas I think if you take that out, it's a little bit better because like, and that's another one of the examples of reference humor. So it's kind of like a two a twofer, but
Yep.
definitely a joke, especially on rewatch, that I was like, yeah, that one never really landed for me and doesn't really, in my opinion, doesn't really work for especially because that's in like the emotional climax of the movie. Like, I appreciate there's kind of a grit to this film. Rod's like, he's completely determined, and like he kind of becomes likable in that way to me, where it's like as a character, because it's almost a Michael Scottness to him, where in everything he does, he's completely determined and just goes like he goes all the way, like to the point where it's like even at the end, you would kind of be dead or close to death, and he was pretty much dead with what happened. Like if you fell from that high and then rolled on like gravel like that, yeah, you're not going
Oh,
to be feeling too good at all. But I like that scene where he like gets up and he's like, "Life is pain. You got to scrape the joy out of it." I appreciate that. I think it's a good emotional climax to the film, and it's a nice like character part for him of like his determination. And then it's like, yeah, of course he's gonna beat his dad up at the end because like that's the whole point of the movie. But I don't know. I liked it.
oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any real like problem with the fact that the movie ends on exactly what you're expecting. Even to the point where it in itself is a joke because because they have like an all-out brawl and then like it devolves into the fact that they end up busting their way through the whole house. At one point, his dad throws a ninja star at him. And, like even the fight itself is like what?
right.
And I mean, it's about what you're going to expect, but it didn't make it not entertaining. I think more so like it's just the quality of the jokes are also like kind of like some of them are like definitely more interesting and funny than others. Like I personally really like all the AM radio jokes. As someone
Yeah.
who respects the radio immensely, it's really funny because AM radio is dead, and they even treat it as kind of this relic because like the music that's played over the course of the AM radio is like more akin to something from like the 1930s or 1940s. And I thought
Yeah.
that was really funny. I'm like, okay, haha, I get it. You're trying to say how old AM radio is. Haha, it's not, you don't respect it anymore, and they're gonna bring it back with this big event.
Yeah, and
And
getting Chris Parnell to be the host was perfect. He has that like cartoonish, like old timey voice, which I think like totally helps. He plays as Jerry from Rick and Morty. For those who don't know, that's probably where most people would know him from, I guess, at this point. But I think he's perfectly put in, and he's another actor I think who works with Andy Samberg a decent amount. And there's like another thing with the plot is there's a lot of conveniences, you know, like, oh, it's convenient that this radio happened to see the online footage, which happened to, like, there's a lot of stuff like that where it's like allows things to happen, and it's a suspension of disbelief thing, I think, which I think is easier in comedies to suspend your disbelief because like, oh, I'm just here to laugh.
Yeah, and I would argue that it's less of a, contrivance of the plot that you need to swallow and more of the same in that it's the parodying of the Hallmark movies, because there's always some kind of convenient, save the day happenstantial thing that happens where, oh look, it's making everything better now. The famous person saw our thing, or we managed to raise the money through spontaneous philanthropy of my community. There's always some kind of thing that happens outside of the main character's control that's supposed to put your faith back in humanity.
Yeah,
And I
it's
think
like,
that
well, I think
they're
that's
just following that trend intentionally.
yeah, I think that's well said too, because that's like the moment in say, "It's a Wonderful Life," like that very old Christmas movie where it's like at the end, everybody comes and gives him money, like all his friends and family, and they save the day or whatever. It's that kind of like outside force moment, which is like after the character's like worst moment, something good happens,
Exactly.
which then like inspires their hope to kind of finish the thing that they set out to do. Yeah, there was a lot to that, I think, where you know it's parroting but also still kind of honoring the tropes in a way that it's like you could tell that the people who made it enjoy those tropes for better or worse. Like there's a reason they're tropes because they're like, oh, they make you feel good, but also it's like, hey, we'll make you feel good, but we want to make you laugh first. Like there's a few moments for me that I really like there's the part where he goes, and this is like kind of a little bit random humor, but that works for me sometimes, is when they're going to do the gravity test or whatever, and so he goes into that longboard, and then he's like, my safe word will be whiskey, and then like he just starts pronouncing every single W word with like a wha, and then he goes like down the hill, and then he like flies right into this van. And one, I don't know if that was real stuntman, but that looked like that hurt. And then this like dude comes out, and Danny McBride just like beats the shit out of him. Um, and that's actually, I quote that line all of the time, where he's like, "I go to church every gosh dang Sunday. You gonna bring the demons out of me?" Like I don't know. I think Danny McBride sometimes like he can really crack me up anyway. But yeah,
yeah,
I don't know. Humor is very subjective, as Sky said. So it's like that's one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of see how you guys feel about this, because like you can kind of live in your own bubble with, especially with comedies of like what you and your siblings or your friends kind of like grew up watching when you were kids, and then you just kind of like it over a while. And when I say kids, I mean like teenagers mostly with this movie. But I'm happy to see that you guys didn't absolutely hate it, which is because I know people that do absolutely hate this movie and other movies like it. Whereas, like for me, there's movies like this that I definitely am not as big of a fan of. Napoleon Dynamite is an example, which like I don't hate it, but
Yeah.
it doesn't quite click with me as much. And I think a lot of that is I enjoy Andy Samberg a little bit more than John Heater as far as these types of comedians go.
You know what the whole movie kind of reminds me of now in retrospect that I really think about it? It has a very similar, just overall styling to it in my brain, to Paul Blart Mall Cop.
oh no,
Wait, really?
I never.
Just in the way that like they take a typical tropic, kind of story structure of
Oh, I
local
see what you're
unassuming
saying.
guy saves the day, and the way that they, this isn't a hero or a cast of characters that I wouldn't say is, overtly likable. They have charm to them, but you have to go through the movie in order to see it. And then you've got the whole, heartwarming ending of, nope, they actually save the day and do it right. And there's no, haha, gotcha, pull the rug out from under you, all is not well twist at the end just to be, self-aware and tropey.
Yeah, and I think that I kind of see also what you're saying with like that comparison, because like I don't think that's necessarily a comparison on the quality of the movie so much as the way they use tropes. But like with Paul Bart Mall Cop, it's kind of it's a parody of, say, like a Die Hard type movie.
Yeah.
Where this is more of a parody of like a feel good inspirational Hallmark type movie. But the way they play on the tropes of the respective genres is kind of similar. Once again, I do think a lot of it does come down to, you have what's his name, Kevin James in Mall Cop, and if you appreciate his type of humor more, then you'll probably like that type of movie more. And I do think a lot of time it does come to that. I do think that the story in Hot Rod, like overall, I think it holds up pretty well, like without having to be in love with the main comedian. Like there's definitely over the top moments, and like I think that the relationship with Isla Fisher kind of works. It's kind of funny. She's like 10 years older than Andy Samberg, which is kind of funny. But
Yeah.
I do think that like overall it's their relationship kind of works to an extent. I like the part where he like uses the mirror to get her over to his house, and then like he's like just banging an engine with the wrong side of a hammer to like impress her. And I thought that was pretty hilarious. Like in the way he acts, he's like, "Oh, you can't just come off the street and demand to be in my crew." I don't know. I appreciate, like, that's when it comes down to, oh, if you don't really care for Andy Samberg's type of comedy, that might not click with you. For me, I like it. Like I'm a huge fan of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I like his stuff. So like the way he acts about things usually can get a laugh out of me. Or like the part when he's in his room and he's like looking over the picture of his dad, and like just like the face he makes when he's like,
I forgot to mention too that I've also been catching up finally on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Never watched it up until the quarantine going on now.
yeah,
I
it's a
finally
good
have
time
the
to
time
watch
to
it.
actually sit down and watch TV.
Yeah, it's a good show.
Yeah.
So it's been cool to get such an exposure to Andy Samberg.
For sure.
He's one of those like one of those like comedic actors that, like, to be honest, like I know him in like a few things, and then I'm like I don't really know where I've seen him the most, and it makes me, it's really weird because like I've seen him in plenty of things, and yet I never really register like my feelings on his like acting. And I
Yeah.
think I kind of know where I land now, and I definitely land on the like. I like it. I definitely enjoy the more like the way he displays characters, and he also he's really good at making someone seem really stupid and yet believable to a degree.
Yeah, which is interesting given that he's such, a smart, self-aware kind of guy in all of his, interviews and talks. I mean, he loves that character, and I think he loves to play that role, but it's so not him normally.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a lot of the time with a lot of these type of comedians. Like Adam Sandler, he gets a lot of flack for a lot of his more recent movies, which I think for the most part is pretty deserved. But he's not dumb.
I wish he would have done more serious acting because I like him in his like sentimental roles.
Well, he's actually a really, really good actor when he cares. But also he knows how to make money, and he's like, "Oh, if I can go on a vacation and then make a movie out of it, make a few $1,000,000 while also being on a vacation." Like he knows what he's doing. But then also sometimes he's like there's a couple of actors or directors or whatever who are making a movie with promise, like Uncut Gems, and they get him and he's like, "This is great." And he puts in a performance that it's really a shame he didn't get nominated for anything for it, because it's kind of, but there's that element to it. And I think Andy Samberg's one of those people too who's like he has a lot of talent, and he's not a dumb guy at all, but he likes to play those type of characters like Jake in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He's kind of an idiot, but he's also like very endearing. And I think
Right.
I think that's something that holds true in Hot Rod as well. Like I said it already, this is kind of repeating, but he's an idiot, but he's a lovable idiot, and like he has this kind of determination to him that I like, and like he's someone you can easily root for. I also think Will Arnett plays the perfect frat bro. But he's only in it for like a teeny bit, but I always laugh at that. Just from because Will Arnett it's Will Arnett. He's so cartoonish.
Well, can we also talk about the fact that the very well-off lawyer is a frat bro, and the Daredevil stuntman is a huge nerd? Like, if you get what I mean by that, it's an interesting juxtaposition that, like, it kind of plays with what you imagine your tropes to be, because you imagine a lawyer would be a very, like, upstanding, smart individual, you know, quotation marks on that. Some people won't, obviously. Everyone has their own perspective of people. But when I think of a stuntman, I think of, like, a party, very just a dude who does what he does. And if you get what I mean by that, like the bro mentality kind of thing, maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, you think of like a Daredevil.
The last thing you'd think about Evel Knievel is that he's just some, sweater-wearing nerd.
Which is pretty funny, but I kind of like that as a thing.
Yeah, do you guys have anything else really to say mainly, or are you kind of ready to drop into like final thoughts and recommendations?
I'm ready to go into final thoughts. I think Hot Rod was short and sweet and what it was. Well, that's not my final thought, but I'm just saying,
Should I go first because I recommended the movie?
Indeed.
Okay, so my final thoughts are, so watching this with a more critical eye, I've definitely noticed some of like the flaws that kind of stick out more. As I said, a couple of the jokes don't really work, and there's a little bit of a pacing issue, I think, and not necessarily in terms of length, because it's actually not a very long movie, which I appreciate. It's like, I think it's less than 90 minutes. There's a couple of scenes that go just a little bit too long that could have probably been cut, but part of me realizing now kind of feel like maybe those jokes went on as long as they did because they were like pushing a little bit to get it to be a little bit longer because they wanted to hit that 90-minute mark. But overall, I really appreciate this movie. It's one of my favorite comedies of all time. It has the type of, like, for some reason, this specific brand of Andy Samberg just connects with me. I'm a big fan of a lot of his stuff. Like, I enjoy Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I actually enjoyed that pop star movie he's in for the most part. Once again, I don't think any of really his movies are perfect or anything. They're not masterpieces, but they're just enjoyable and light, and they're kind of like, some popcorn that you can have on a dreary day, that. I was about to quote that one movie with Gene Wilder with the kids in the chocolate factory that I can't think of the name, but it's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. But anyways, so what were your guys' recommendations? I would recommend this movie to anybody who enjoys lighthearted comedies, anybody who likes Andy Samberg, and anybody who likes his type of comedy. If you're somebody who's just like kind of can't stand his type of comedy, that's a little like, about dumb people being dumb and that branch of comedy, then I wouldn't recommend it to you because you probably won't like it. But comedy is very subjective in that way, so you kind of have to know what you're getting into.
You want to go next, guy?
Sure. Hot Rod. It's part of that type of like comedy movie that like I get really like it's like pretty hard for me to like be totally happy with it because there's a possibility the movie could dip too far and I would start hating it. My humor, while I do have stupid dummy poo poo humor, I definitely like can't acknowledge when something is going way too far, and never does. Hot Rod stays pretty much on the path of like a stupid little random humor, but not to the point where I'm like, all right, now you're just doing it to try and get me to laugh. You're just trying too hard. It's really boring and or obnoxious with what you're doing, but it doesn't do that. I'm not gonna say it's like one of the best comedies I've ever seen. Obviously, I don't think it's that great, but I definitely enjoyed it for what it is, and I can definitely say that like I had a good time watching it, and I you know what, I'd recommend it. I don't really have a problem recommending it. It's a good watch. It's fun. It's a good time. Just temper your expectations for what it is you're going into.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I stand on it. Is that it's a really good sometimes food of a movie. You definitely got to be into that Will Ferrell style of comedy to really take everything out of it. But even then, I mean, Andy Samberg is just so hard to hate that, you know, even someone who doesn't really like that style of comedy, especially like me or Sky, um, we still enjoyed it. You know, we were able to laugh at a lot of the punchlines. At least I did. Um, enjoy the movie as a whole and just have a good time. You know, it's not something you're gonna watch over and over again and buy on Blu-ray and put in your collection, in my personal opinion. But you watch it once every year, maybe every 6 months. Hot Rod's a good movie.
Yeah. Yeah, glad to see that you guys liked it. Um, so yeah, that was this episode of The Commuters. I believe that Sky has the next recommendation, but you will learn what that is next week, or not next week, but whenever we get around to recording it. And thanks everybody for tuning in who did. Hopefully you learned something and maybe check out Hot Rod, because I don't think it's very well known about the movie. I don't think it's got a very big reputation. But yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.